Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She is the author of several children's books, no other than Miss Melinda Martin. If I'm not mistaken? Yes. So, Miss Melinda, can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yes. I want to clarify that I am actually not the author of the books, but that authors hire me to design the books. And so people that want to self publish, they need somebody like me who has the experience to help protect their investment to make sure they have a good product. And so I art direct and I consult with the author on all of the many decisions that have to be made when you want to publish a professional quality children's book.
Okay, so you are a ghostwriter. Writer.
Well, I not really, but there are times when I do. I help the author. I give them a manuscript review, and then I let them know how the manuscript can be improved. And then I partner them with an editor who will get into more of the details. There probably are people who hire ghostwriters for children's books, like probably all of the celebrities that we see with children's books. I
Yes.
highly doubt they wrote their books. But I've been surprised before.
Certainly. So, what are the key elements of a successful children's book?
So what most people find really interesting if they haven't studied a picture book before is that the best picture books have only have about 600 words, and so a lot of times a first time author who has not who hasn't done a lot of research, they will bring me a manuscript that's like 2,000 words and it's too much. And so we have to spend a lot of time clarifying what the message of that book is. Do you have kids yourself?
Yes, I do.
And so one of the reasons we don't want books to be so long is because we want the parent to be able to get through the book in about 10 minutes or less. And because that's also the child's attention span most times. And so no parent wants to be reading a 60-page picture book, or very few. I don't want to say no parent, but most parents, when they read the bedtime story, they want to get in a good 10 minutes of snuggle time, book time, and leave the kid ready to fall asleep, not overstimulated from a long book.
Definitely. So, how do you determine the appropriate age group for your story?
So that's a great question because picture books they are broken down by like two-year age gaps. So when you go to Amazon and you're looking for a book, you'll see that there is a 0 to 2 age range. There is a 2 to 4, a 4 to 6, a 6 to 8, and so that is why it's important to work with a developmental editor, because a developmental editor, she's going to ask you these types of questions as well. We want to know from the author what age range do they want to reach. And, sometimes you'll get authors that are like, well, my book's for everybody. But that's really not the best approach, because it's simply just not true. And picture books, they do need to be written for children ideally who are under 8 years old, because around the 8-year-old mark the kids start being pulled into chapter books and other books that they don't consider a baby book. And unfortunately, we know how kids are, and there are kids that are 8 or 9 years old that will make fun of another 8 or 9 year old for reading a baby book, um, because kids are cruel.
Totally agree. So, what is the typical word count for different types of children's books?
So when you have like a fiction book, like let me see what I have close by over here. Okay, yeah. So we have like this is Betsy Bug, Betsy Bug and Friends in the Secret Birthday Mission. So this word count is around 700 words. It's a 32-page picture book, and that's really where you want to be. Is as close to 600 words as you can be for a fiction book. There are some really great books, like Extra Yarn is a popular children's book. I think it may have 350 words. And why that is so important is to have a low word count. It's not just having a low word count, it's having a um, it's having text that also allows the illustrator to add their art to the text, because the text and the art work together to present the story. The text shouldn't be able to just live by itself with no art. And that is the art of the picture book, is it requires the right illustrator and the right author to really make that magic happen. But when you have a nonfiction book, like let's see, I'm just going to grab something close by. Like this is a really big book, uh, The Incredible Cross Sections, which this is, I did not design this book, but I keep a lot of books around me for inspiration. So like this book is really cool. I think it's a 9 by 12, but it's about all the different um,
Yes.
buildings and types of really cool subway stations, fishing boats, and it gets into stuff like this. And so I think there's probably 600 words just on this one spread, right? And so when you get into the world of nonfiction, it just really changes. And I wanted to show, let me see where this has a really cool feature called here it is. It's called a double gatefold, where you can like see how big
Open
this
it.
is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so this is
Nice.
a big
Yes.
book. And I do books like this as well. I really love getting into books that make it fun for the kids. Now, this is a specialty book, but say you have a book that is like, I'm trying to see what's around. Say you have a book that's like a biography book, and it's a nonfiction book. Those books can be longer, around 1,200 words, 1,500 words, maybe. It just really depends on the content and what is needed to get that story across.
Certainly. So, people, we want to clarify again that Miss Melinda Martin is not the author that we are featuring right now. She is only a helper for those people want to create magnificent children's books. Am I
Yes,
correct, Miss Melinda?
yes, exactly. That's exactly
Yes.
right.
So what you are seeing now, if you are watching us, those are the creation or the Miss Melinda created for those authors that want to be helped in creating elegant children's books.
Yes, exactly. Because there's
Yes,
um, a lot of times, unfortunately, when people self-publish a children's book, they don't have the experience, and the book is ugly. Essentially, it's
yes,
just a picture book is a piece of art, and I don't believe that all art is good art. I'm not that kind of person. Um,
yes,
I think it's definitely very important what we put in front of our children, because picture books are not just telling a story, they are teaching a child about reading, spelling, properly edited sentences. They're teaching, about art, about how to use white space, about how to tell a story, the plot of a story, character development. And so I am very passionate and a bit judgy when it comes to picture books, because we need to do better for our kids. They don't just need our the cheapest book that we can produce. I don't know who thinks
Certainly.
that's okay, but they deserve
Certainly.
better.
Certainly, it must be catchy, bold, and something that the children like to see. So, Miss Melinda, what are common mistakes to avoid when developing characters for young readers?
Um, so one thing that you'll see a lot when you start researching is it's always best, if possible, to try to stick to a non-human character, and that's not always the case. You can see from my website, like we have Freya Takes Charge. That book was specifically about Vikings and the Scottish people, and so we did have humans in that book, but like with the Troublemaker, we used a dog and a flea. And so we try to stay away from when you use characters that are human, it's inevitable, especially in 2025, that someone is going to feel left out because it's very difficult to put 100% representation in one character, right? And so I feel like that is one thing that people make a mistake on is they they assume that they need to have a human character, but that's not true. And then second from that is they actually underdevelop the character. They're not giving the reader any emotional attachment to the character. And so I think it's good to know exactly who um, you're publishing this book for. What is the child that you want reading this book? And then try to find ways to implement some of the things that that type of child has into your characters, like, maybe the types of clothing that they would wear, even if it's an animal or a fruit, like we saw with Veggie Tales. Make the character relatable, if possible, to get that emotional attachment in there.
So, Miss Melinda, should children's book characters always have a clear moral lessons or messages?
I grew up with Aesop's fables, and I love a good lesson. But it's been very interesting watching picture books, oh, through the self-publishing era, because so many people have used it as their agenda platform, and used it as a way to preach to the kids instead of teach through a lighter lesson. Like, for example, one book we just completed is Tigers Aren't Monkeys. And that book is about, accepting. Yeah, it's on my front page there. Tigers Aren't Monkeys. And so it's about a tiger cub that was found by a mother monkey, right? And
Yes.
um, at the gist of the story is it's okay to be different, but be true to yourself. But I think a really good children's book story, it's not so obvious, right? You're not just being hit upside the head with all of these lessons. If most of the time, and children really haven't changed that much, and I don't think they will change that much because it's just the human way. You kind of gotta like sneak the vegetables into the food, right? And it's the same thing with stories. If they think that you're going to teach them a lesson with this story, then they may not want to hear the story unless they're a very unique child. A child wants to go for fun and exciting adventures, and then they should be able to take away from the story what is important to them, and again, not have our agenda pushed on them. So I do love a good moral. I just don't love preaching.
Certainly. So, Miss Melinda, what would be your advice for those people out there who want to start their children's book?
So most people jump in, they just do not realize how difficult this is. I mean, it's difficult if you want to do it well. If you just want to make a crappy book, well, that's easy. But I, I would always encourage people, before you spend any money on an illustrator, or even me, like I'm a book designer, before they spend money with me, they need to get their story looked at by other people in the industry, such as like a developmental editor, and they need to be open to a well-rounded critique. Also, just asking your friends and family, hey, what'd you think of my story? That's not usually a good idea, because most people are just going to okey doke you, like, oh, yeah, it's great. Or they're going to give you unnecessary feedback, right? It's like usually one end of the spectrum or the other. But my advice is to seek out people who this is our job. This is our business. This is what we do on a daily basis. And to be able to get someone that can give you industry standard critique on your manuscript, instead of someone who's just going to tell you what you want to hear. And most of the time, the illustrator isn't hired until much later in the process. A lot of times, I see a lot of authors, and they do this because they just don't know. They see other people doing it, so they're like, oh, well, this must be the way you do it. But you see authors going straight to illustrators. I'm looking for an illustrator for my book. And an illustrator is only one of the people that you need to correctly do a picture book. But most of the time, these illustrators are they're so hungry for business, and they also don't know the ropes either, a lot of them. Now, there are some that do, but I'm speaking to the ones who are like, wake up one day and are like, I'm going to start illustrating children's books, even though they don't have any experience. And we all have to start somewhere, but it is such a disservice to that client to just say, yes, I can illustrate your book, and you don't even know what the book is about. You don't know how many pages the book is. You don't know how if the book has been through developmental edit. And so I do always caution the authors to do their due diligence. First, they need to look up how to actually publish a children's book, what's involved in that. And they need to be treating it like a business decision if they're going to be spending $10,000 to $20,000. Like, you can do a not very good book on your own without spending any money. There's that type of author. But then my clients are investing anywhere between $10,000 and $20,000, not just in my service, but between what they're spending on the illustrator, on the editor, on professional printing. They are publishing more than one book because they are really trying to be a publisher, not just somebody who published a book one time. And so I think it's important to know who you are in the scenario and do the research based on where you want to end up. Like, if you just want to say, I published a book, please don't spend $20,000 on that you're never going to make back, unless you just have $20,000 to throw away, which would be weird.
Miss Melinda, thank you so much for your advice. Encouraging and empowering too. So, what will be your short term and long term goals as a book creator?
Um, I have worked without a team for a long time because I love to learn all of the parts of the mechanism. I want to be able to do as many things as I can, so that I know when I hire somebody what I need to expect of them. And so it's hard to hire somebody if you don't know exactly what it is they're supposed to do. So I've dedicated the last several years of my life to learning I've spent a lot of money educating myself about the professional picture book process, about all the different team members, working with different people throughout the community. And now in 2025, I'm going to be assembling my own team, so that when an author comes to me, that I have all of the services in house and don't have to connect them with people outside of my team. So I'm excited for that.
Good luck to your goal, Miss Melinda.
Thank
Looking
you.
forward for more and more empowering children's books to come. So, do writers need to provide illustration notes when submitting a manuscript?
Um, that it's good to have some general notes.
Yes.
What I see a lot is people go overboard and they treat their illustrator like a screwdriver, or they treat their book designer like a screwdriver. And we don't like that. Like, we are artists. We want to be hired because we want you to see the value in what we can create with you. And so most people just go overboard and they dictate instead of trusting the people they hired to pull from their creative well. And most of the time, if you just trust the creative that you hired to an extent, I mean, you want to trust but verify, right? Most of the time, the illustrator will come up with something way better than what you could have come up with on your own. However, what's interesting is that you do need to make some type of art note, because you have to do what's called like an initial storyboarding of your own content while you're writing it. You need to keep up with how many words are on a page and how many pages are in the book, because ideally we need that book to come in at around 32 pages. But when you get with a book designer such as myself, sometimes I'm going to have some ideas about, oh, well, why don't we have a wordless spread here instead of just having one more spread with text on it? Let's just make this some really fun art. But then we also still have to keep it within 32 pages. So other changes have to be made, other tweaks have to be made to keep those parameters in play. But yeah, so general art notes are always good. Just don't get too emotionally attached to it, because more than likely there's room for improvement.
Certainly, there's a room for improvement and to be excellent.
Yes. Seems like you and I
Certainly.
definitely agree on just the way that we think about things.
Yes. So, Miss Melinda, what should writers consider when working with an illustrator?
Well, so there is so much to know about working with an illustrator. Before you ever contact an illustrator, you want to kind of assemble a creative brief, right? Which a creative brief should accompany the contract. And so those are things that I take care of for my clients. I help them create the creative brief so that when we do find an illustrator, the illustrator is going to know, okay, this is a 32-page book. We think we want to go with 5 spreads, 10 single pages, and 20 spot illustrations. We also need the illustrator to concept the cover or not concept the cover. So most of the time, the illustrator is not the one who's concepting the cover. I am usually doing that first, because there's a lot that goes into the cover versus what just goes on a single page. But sometimes you do have illustrators who are really good at concepting covers. And so that's an additional line item on the proposal. And so before you ever contact an illustrator, there's just a lot of legwork that has to be done. In addition to that, you need to know what type of budget you have. It's not uncommon for illustrators to charge $10,000 or $12,000. Like, if they are used to working in the traditional publishing world and you reach out to this illustrator, they're going to want to make what they are making from traditional publishing, which is $10,000 plus dollars. However, you will find some illustrators who maybe $3,000 for the whole book. The average rate for the illustrator I work with, just because they have a lot of experience, they already know the process. Like, they're going to be in that $6,000 and up range, which that is a good sweet spot for your illustrator. Um, it takes a long time to do the illustrations. It's not a one and done process, especially if you're paying somebody $6,000. It should not be a one and done process. There's actually several steps to go from beginning to end, because you want to start with, well, the creative brief, but then you also have to get into the character development. You have to have the illustrator do a character sketch before you officially hire them. Now, the character sketch is usually a paid service. Some illustrators will offer it for free, but I'd never like to take advantage of anybody like that. If I'm contacting an illustrator, then I am asking what their rate is for a character sketch. If they offer to do it for free, then I mean, I will let them, but I don't encourage that. And so there's a lot of testing the illustrator, making sure that they are using professional processes. And then once we actually get them signed with the contract, then they're ready to start the hard work of bringing the book to life in tandem with me and the author. And we all kind of work together as a team to communicate with each other about what's important on each page.
So, Miss Melinda, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, Food 101, in its fifth season. People, fifth season with Chef Alessandro, one of the specialty chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. Please do listen to our latest episode. We are reading our letter senders all over the world. So please do listen, Food 101, wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Melinda, how important is diversity and representation in children's book illustrations?
I think it's very important. And I always tell people this, like, I mean, I grew up in Texas. I grew up in a small town in Texas. And we were not allowed to have non-white people over to our house. We were not allowed to listen to, it had to be country music or Christian music. And basically my dad was a bigot. And that really impacted me, because we would go to church, then but then we had to just hang out with white people, and I really did not, I didn't understand that, and that just really impacted me as a small child. And as I have grown up, right, I raised my children that don't be like that.
Yes.
That it's so important. So it's actually so important to me that I moved my family to South Texas, into a community which is 80% Latino, so that my children could experience what it was like to be the minority. Because I just think it's really important. It can really impact you, to be treated differently. And you know what? My kids are treated differently, and that's part of the experience I wanted to give them. And I know that it has made them stronger people, and that they don't treat people differently because they know how it feels to be treated like that. And
Yes.
so that is one thing that I have focused on in the 15 years that I've been designing books. Is 15 years ago, when you were looking at stock photography, it was just all white people. I mean, it really was. And I'm just like, well, that's not healthy. And so I was very thankful when the world started to change a little bit, right? When we started to see diversity, in commercials, in advertisements, and then that worked its way into children's books, into stock photography, because it really is that important, and to be, um, just to make sure that children see themselves in books. And that could be the color of their skin, right? It could be their body shape. It could be their accessibility. And I think it's great that people are focusing on having more diversity in picture books, because that's really is just going to help our children, and that is the end goal, is to give our children a good experience, as good of an experience as we can give them, and to help them feel like they can achieve whatever they want to achieve here in America. And I hope that the books I've worked on have given given that to the children, because it is very important to me.
Indeed, Miss Melinda Martin. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. And we are hoping for more and more and more empowering children's books to come. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your profession?
Yes, yes. Well, so if you want to support me directly,
Yes.
you can browse my website at melindamartin.me. I do have a process for working with people, because not everybody is the right fit. I am sure there are some people after listening to me who don't like me. And so I would say, if you don't like me, don't hire me. um, but
that's
if there
that's
are
the
people that
logic.
like me,
Yes.
give me a call.
Yes. Yes, people, let's support Miss Melinda Martin because you support her more and more, as I said, more and more empowering children's books to come. So, Miss Melinda, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.